Hi, welcome to the Brea Museum, home of the Brea Historical Society. We're located at 495 South Brea Boulevard on the corner of Brea and Elm in City Hall Park. Our mission is to collect, preserve, and distribute and share the cultural material of the city of Brea. And our museum is filled with interesting artifacts that will help tell the story. So come on in and take a walk through Brea's history.
Hi, this is our museum cat. It's called a saber-toothed cat. Lots of times it's been mistakenly called a saber-toothed tiger, but it's not related to a tiger or a lion. It's its own species. These amazing animals roamed all through California. In fact, they went from Canada all the way down through the Americas down to South America. It's called a saber-toothed cat because of its two large teeth, which resemble a saber knife or a saber sword. We have found so many artifacts in California that in 1974, the state of California named it its official state fossil. We received this from the La Brea tar pits. They made a cast from actual bones that they had at the museum and then gave us this representation. These animals, like I said, were 600 to 800 pounds, and they were so heavy that they couldn't chase after their prey. So what they did is they do like our cats that we have now. They would hide in the grass. And then when their prey would come by, they would spring out at them and they would attack them with their sabers and with their extremely large claws that they had and attack them. Or if they couldn't, what they do is that they would climb trees and they would hang on the lower branch. And then when their prey would go by, they would drop down on them. Once they bit them and attacked with their claws, they would get off, and then they would wait for the animal to die, and then they would eat them with their other teeth, because these teeth were rather brittle, and if they broke them off, they didn't repair themselves, and they would have a problem. These animals died out about 10,000 years ago. But like I said, there's thousands and thousands of these fossils all over California. And we're lucky enough to have one here. So their main food that they had were young mastodons and young woolly mammoths. And the scientists feel that these became extinct when their prey that they ate also became extinct. So if you want to see our wonderful museum cat, we have one here waiting for you.
Okay, here we are in the display area of the museum, the gallery. Good afternoon, I'm glad to have you with us. Anyway, we're talking about the oil industry in Brea that's covered here at the Brea Museum. We have some of the models that were built by men that we've heard were constructed by men that was injured in the oil fields in the early days. During their recovery, they built some of these models that you see. We had a vast oil industry here. The main reason for the oil in this area booming was the railroads were coming in around the turn of the century into Brea and Southern California area, or the Western United States. And they found that they could run the locomotives on oil instead of coal that had to be brought from out of state. So the oil became very valuable to the railroads here. So here's a picture taken of the hills looking out toward the Walnut area to the north out of Brea. About 1919 this picture was taken. So anyway, we have another nice model that was taken. This model a gentleman actually built where you could pour oil in here and you could flip a switch and it would operate and it would draw oil and then pump it back into this little can. So a lot of the kids like that. We have a lot of the old tools that were used in the oil industry. So come and visit us and you'll see how important oil was to Brea in the early days and all of the western United States. Okay, here we are at our old gas pump, built around 1919. The interesting thing about this gas pump, it was used right here in Brea on one of the oil company orange ranches. You wonder what oil and oranges have to do with each other, but the oil companies owned so much land around the Brea area, they wondered, what are we going to do with this extra land? We don't need to put more wells on. So someone come up with the bright idea of having orange groves, and this come off of the Orange Ranch up off of Berry Street here. Close to Berry Street, Union Oil had big tanks, above ground tanks, and in 1926 we had a very severe fire and 2 of the tanks were struck by lightning. We had a huge, one of the largest fires in the western United States that burned for days and days before they finally burned themselves out. The heat was so much, or so intense, that it warped the railroad tracks that ran by it. Also, it caused windstorms that blew the roofs off of houses in the northwestern part of town. It was a very terrible oil fire. As we move around, this is Mr. and Mrs. Schweitzer, proudly riding in their brand new 1906 Ford out in the hills of Olinda. Olinda was where oil was first discovered out here, which is all part of the city of Brea now. That well was put in 1896, and it's still pumping today out at our oil museum in Olinda. Anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Schweitzer were very active in Brea politics and government for many years, and their grandson was a mayor of Brea here a few years ago. So anyway, you can tell they're very proud of their brand new 1906 Ford. So here we are at the north end of our exhibit hall. We're so proud of some of our things that have been donated, such as this old World War I vintage propeller. And we've got that because we had a very interesting aero history here at one time. We had 2 airports at one time. One was across the street, a dirt strip along Brea Boulevard, or Pomona Avenue again. It became so popular, about 1913, they built a larger airstrip out here east of town, and they had famous people like Jimmy Doolittle flew in, now well before the Tokyo raids. He flew in setting a cross-country speed record before he did the bombing of Japan or Tokyo with the Tokyo raids. But anyway, our airplane industry was going very strong. They started a Brea Aero Club when the new airstrip was built out here east of town. One of the big things that started up was the aircraft manufacturing plant. Okay, here we are in the northwest corner of our exhibit hall. Is more of our aircraft displays. We're very proud of this aircraft assembly plant we had here in Brea in the early days. Now we're talking around 1915, 1920. They started building airplanes with only one wing, where you'll see most often in the early days of aircraft industry, they had double wing airplanes. Brea built these ones, or 2 gentlemen in Brea opened an aircraft plant building a single wing airplane. This little airplane they built, and it was very successful, except for they changed the engine from a motorcycle engine to a regular airplane engine. It was taken out to the airfield out here for an air show. They told the gentleman, don't give it full power because they're not sure. These are the engineers that built the plane. Told the young pilot, don't give it full power during the air show because we don't know if the airplane superstructure can handle additional power of this new engine. Well, they saw him flying around the field. All of a sudden they heard him throttle up. About the time he did that, one wing broke off the plane. And he went in and of course was killed right away. So it's kind of sad, this picture that you see back here. This gentleman sitting on the wing of the Hummingbird airplane. Probably within an hour of when this picture was taken, he was killed and crashed in the airplane. But they went on to build larger single-wing airplanes. They also went on to start building radial engines that were diesel engines for airplanes here in the Brea plant. So we have quite a good aviation industry, but World War II come along, the Depression first come along before World War II. People didn't have the money to fly, and of course World War II really quenched the hobby airplane or flyers here in town, so our aviation industry pretty well faded out. But anyway, we have a lot to be proud of in our past aviation history. Thank you.
The Brea Museum's downtown diorama represents the center of the city as it appeared in 1928. The 10-foot by 7-foot model is built to 1/87 scale, commonly known as HO scale, and includes the downtown area along Brea Boulevard, then known as Pomona Avenue, from just north of Ash Street and the Pacific Electric tracks to south of Birch Street Avenue to the west and Orange Avenue to the east. Research into creating an historically accurate model utilized aerial photos, insurance maps, and the museum's vast collection of vintage photos and other documentation. Many of the buildings were built by C.L. Gardner in the 1990s when they were still standing. Mr. Gardner carefully documented each structure prior to the impending urban redevelopment. As we enter the model from the north on Pomona Avenue, we cross the Pacific Electric tracks and view the PE's depot on the west side of the street. The famous red cars of the Pacific Electric continued east to Yorba Linda, where they terminated at that depot, now the home of Polly's Restaurant. Traveling to the east, Brea residents could take a red car into Whittier and continue to Los Angeles, Long Beach, Santa Monica, Riverside, and many other Southland cities. The Pacific Electric also provided freight service to Brea. While none of Brea's famed oil-producing facilities were located in the heart of downtown, many of these businesses supported the local oil industry, including Brown and Dowser Lumberyard. The stores along Pomona Avenue reflect the self-sufficient nature of the city in 1928 due to its somewhat isolated location. In addition to being commercial ventures, many of these buildings also offered boarding facilities for the many unmarried oil workers, along with much-needed restaurants and barbershops. Recreation opportunities in town included the Crescent Pool Hall and the Red Lantern Theater, which offered both film and live performances. Two banks provided both business and individual services to Brea. Baldwin Ford sold the latest that Henry Ford had to offer, including the Fordson tractor line. Running north and south on either side of Pomona, Walnut and Orange Avenues contain oil lease lots where industry workers could build their own home and put down roots in Brea. All of the area represented by the diorama was razed in the mid-1990s, leaving only the 1936 Christian Church on Ash Street still standing. This three-dimensional model is orientated correctly to the real-life directions of the city and is further augmented by many historical wall photos also correctly orientated. At this date, about a half dozen structures remain to be scratch-built.
In this part of the museum is our sports exhibit. In this local area here, we celebrate baseball. In October of 1924, Brea hosted a game between the traveling team of Babe Ruth and a traveling team of Walter Johnson. Both at the time were famous baseball players of the era. They played in a field called the Brea Bowl, which is located off Lambert and Brea Boulevard at the time. And people from all Orange County came out to watch the game. Walter Johnson had some of his friends and other players from major leagues, and Babe Ruth brought friends of his, and they would do barnstorming trips around the area and around the country. This exhibit here, we have a photo from the big game. Walter Johnson on the left, Babe Ruth on the right. Rumor has it that this is how they determined who the home team was, by who had their hand on the knob of the bat. And it looks like Babe Ruth had the home team. In the picture, you also see a picture of a baseball. This is an actual baseball that was used in the game, signed by several players, including Babe Ruth. It's been in possession for a number of years. and the museum's fortunate enough to have this on display. This exhibit here, a young man here in Brea, is a project put together a history of Walter Johnson. And he spent a couple of years looking for information of Walter Johnson's career. Of course, Walter Johnson's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And it's an excellent exhibit, excellent learning tool about Walter Johnson and early baseball in the United States. This exhibit here is an example of a water pipe used to distribute water through main systems of the city. Water was tough to come by back in the day, and as the wells were drilled, they had to transport water to different parts of the city. It's made out of wood planks. The steel bands help hold it together. Water in wood, the water will swell the wood, the metal bands hold it together, and it really eliminates most of the leakage. There are some times when it will leak, but with the swelling wood is how they sealed up all these seams. And as I said, the wire bands keep it all together. Continuing with the baseball exhibit, all these photos here represent baseball teams from back in the early 1900s. There wasn't much entertainment around. Baseball was really expanding across the country, and a lot of the local businesses and companies, oil companies especially, put together teams. And they competed against each other all over the county. Almost any night of the week you could find a baseball game to go to. This exhibit commemorates a lot of Brea Olinda High School athletic history. In the cabinet we have trophies, we have photographs of CIF teams, footballs, memorabilia from these awards as part of the awards to championship games and teams. Some of these date back to the 1930s, and trophies back in the early 1940s along with that. Brea was put on the map with high school football starting about 1956 with some very, very strong teams when Dick Tucker was the head coach, and winning CIF championship after CIF championship. Next to this is an exhibit about Randy Jones, our hometown baseball hero. Randy went on and played at Chapman College and had an outstanding career with the San Diego Padres, winning a Cy Young Award. Randy still is involved with the Padres, and at one point was doing post-game interviews and discussions about games. In this corner of the museum, we have photographs and exhibit of all the schools dating back to the early 1900s. As you know, as people come to towns, they need education for their kids. The large panorama here is the old Brea Olinda High School, which is on Burt Street. It's now gone. Olinda had its own school out in the canyon for all the oil field workers. We have Laurel School, another grammar school. And on my left here is the original grammar school, Brea Junior High. I hope this gives you a good feel for the Brea Museum, and please come by and see us, visit our webpage, and we look forward to your visit.
Hi, my name is Barbara Yates Vega, and this is my great-grandfather, W.D. Schaffer. He is on my mother's side of the family. W.D. Schaffer was an apprentice in the oil field business, and he worked up in Olinda. And in 1922, he purchased the property at Redwood and Birch and created Schaffer Tool Works. Now, Schaffer Tool Works was meant to be an oil field repair business, but he invented a piece of machinery, a tool referred to as the flow beam, which could accurately measure the flow of oil coming out of the fields. Then he also invented a blowout preventer. Now, this blowout preventer is still used today. It is something that he invented that prevents gushers, that are something that when you drill in a well deep, you hit the natural gas and it creates a gusher. This blowout preventer he uses and he created is still used today. Now, Schaffer Toolworks was a family-ran business. In 1946, he passed away, and his oldest son, Don Schaffer, took over the business with his two sisters, Esther Salmon, my grandmother, and Betty Wilson. This family, they kept the business until about 1968, and then 1977 it was turned over and from National Lead, and they used the National Lead Schaffer name, and it is still producing equipment today. Now, Mr. Schaffer, WD, he was also very involved with the community. He was mayor for 8 years. He was very involved with his loved Brea Lions Club, and he was a member of the Eastern Star and with his wife, and also he was an organist for the Brea Congregational Church. He donated a beautiful organ that is still there today on Imperial Highway. This man had passed away before I was born, but I wish I would have met him, but I do appreciate the legacy he left for my family. Hi, welcome to Levita's Kitchen. This kitchen was designed about the 1930s era. I just love this beautiful high chair. Isn't this the best? Check out this intercom system for the back in the day to find what the maids wanted. Now, as you go by here, you'll see this fabulous stove, this stove and oven, about 1935. And I want you to guess what this is. Okay, time's up. It's a toaster. It's really cool. You can get it on both sides. This is an iron, and it could be used as a lethal weapon or a dumbbell, but it was electric. It wasn't something you just had to get hot. It is very heavy. And as you go by here, check out this very dangerous fan. But I want you to predict what this is. Yes, it's called Speedway, so you probably know that this is a washing machine. Kind of looks like R2-D2 from Star Wars, but that's just my opinion. Now, you probably know what this is. If you've ever heard the phrase, you've been put through the ringer, this is a ringer. You put your wet clothes into the ringer, and then you hang it out to dry. Now, as you go on, you can check out this very cool refrigerator. Here, I'll go on this side. This refrigerator is actually a refrigerator from 1930-ish, and it is extremely heavy, very dangerous now, where this would very heavy to put in. And as you go through, there's all sorts of different tools that they would use, another toaster, and there's the ice pick up here. If you can look up here, you'll see the little sign, ice, and if you wanted them to deliver 25 pounds, you put that up. If you're having a party, you turn it and you go, please deliver 100 pounds. Anyways, I think that is so cool. But my favorite thing is this telephone. You have to come check out this phone. It's in our museum, and then you have to remember your phone number back in the day. 529-3209 was mine.